Gauteng Police Commissioner Elias Mawela says that the increase in crime against women and vulnerable children by people known to them is a cause for concern. Mawela was speaking at the release of Gauteng's third quarter crime statistics for the period between October to December 2022. Statistics show that femicide in Gauteng soared by nearly 50% during the 2022 festive season. Mawela says that the serious crimes category, which includes contact-related crimes, has increased by 7.1%. He says that assaults, GBH and common assault remain the main contributors to the overall figure of contact crime. Mawela says that for the period under review, these two crimes alone contributed over half of the contact crimes category. Mawela says that aggravated robberies are still prevalent in the province. Well, for some analysis, we're now joined by Dr. Yakisius, who's the head of African Futures and Innovation at the ISS. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. I suppose, sadly, these statistics don't shock us, but are you concerned about the increases in some areas?
Good evening, Peter. Yes, I think every South African should be. Crime trends have grown worse every year on year. And of course, in the aftermath of COVID-19, we've also seen new patterns emerging. And South Africa has, for perhaps more than a decade, followed the same kind of high policing, high visibility efforts to deal with crime, and clearly these are not working. Almost on every indicator of efficiency, things are in actual fact going in the wrong direction. So we really need a clear commitment from government to enter into a partnership at every level and to professionalize the police, and a host of recommendations that have been made year on year, but don't seem to be implemented.
We'll talk a little bit more about these recommendations, but why do you think the visible policing isn't working? What's the shift?
Well, the crime is a complex phenomena, and it is also highly localized and context specific. Police deal with visible crime and very often can only deal with crime once it has been reported. Whereas much of the crime, you were during the bulletin referring to femicide, for example, occurs behind closed doors and very often not reported to the police. South Africa has high levels of structural violence. We are a violent society with one of the highest rates of murder in the world. And despite the fact that the budget of the South African police is almost 100 billion rand per year, that has, and visible policing has been tried over and over again, that has not managed to prevent any crime, because the police are not in a sense in the crime prevention business. They basically respond and can provide a degree of visibility. But to deal with crime, you need to strengthen, well, there are many things that need to happen, but it's really detective work and crime prevention work, and crime intelligence work that over long periods of time will bring crime down. And also that work needs to be very localized and context specific. It's not flooding areas with policemen and women in blue. It creates a sense of confidence, but it really does very little to deal with bringing perpetrators to book, making sure that they are taken to court, and they indeed, that our success rates improve. Success rates, for example, with murder have declined astronomically over the last probably 8-9 years, since 2010, 2012, when our murder rate was at its lowest. So a host of issues, much of it comes down to management within the police and within the broader criminal justice system. And then, of course, the need to cooperate and to bring in communities into crime prevention and crime combating strategies.
So what you've described as possible ways to go seems a little bit out of kilter with the Gauteng provincial government's plans. They're spending quite a lot of money deploying technology, things like drones. How much will that help? And is this the right way to go, or could they better spend that money elsewhere?
Peter, at a preliminary level of analysis, I must say I'm quite concerned about the idea that you can throw technology and money at a problem that is really, that the origins of that problem lie within, for example, the police. Many of the murders in South Africa, as we know, are committed by weapons that find themselves from the police and the security agencies that sometimes are sold but leak out into criminal networks. So if you fix, for example, the firearms registry and the management of firearms, you will do much more than spending money on drones and on helicopters and on more vehicles. If you fix the forensics department within the police, something that can very easily be done, you will ease the prosecution of and the rates through which successful prosecution could happen. If you move policing from a very highly centralized, almost 200,000 strong men and women down to metropolitan and provincial level, you will bring policing down to local communities. We have almost 200 generals within the South African Police Service. And then the most important thing is to enter into partnerships with a variety of local communities, the private sector, and so on and so forth, that can try and deal with the social fabric challenges of crime. Policing, as I indicated in the beginning, is only one component of dealing with our extraordinary high levels of violence in this country, and it is largely a reactive issue. We should much more be investing in crime prevention, and in some of those components, detectives and other components that I mentioned. I mean, for example, if you look at the size of the VIP protection and the budget that goes towards that, it's an example of just a completely skewed prioritization. Never mind the bloated ranks and the collapse in the police disciplinary system and so on. So we throwing more technology and more money at this problem, I must say, I don't think that's going to solve anything.
So how do we deal with those crimes that you described that happen behind closed doors? Children and women who are set upon by their loved ones, people in their family. And that is a huge number.
Because the majority of violent crime in South Africa occurs between people that know one another, within communities. And flooding areas with high-profile policing is not going to solve that. That's only going to be, and neither can the police solve that. That can only be resolved by bringing other components of, for example, social welfare, and those type of interventions, community organizations into the picture, because only they can deal with that. We know that the underreporting numbers on, for example, femicide and crimes against women and children are huge. So I again, the answer, the policing is part of the answer, but it's not the answer. The answer is a really integrated effort at bringing every sector of government, business and communities into dealing with the considerations that give rise to crime, that drive crime. Let's take the abuse. Let's take the issue of alcohol abuse, which is a huge problem in South Africa. The police cannot deal with alcoholism and the extent to which that drives violence. That should be dealt with by local government and through legislation and through policing and so on and so forth. So many of these problems are not really policing problems, and the police can't solve them, much as the police itself is in a state almost of crisis.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there, Dr. Cilliers. Always good to talk to you and get your insights on this big issue, which seems to just keeps growing. But thanks so much for giving us some points.